when you're running a weight room, I can really only describe it as controlled chaos. And if you've ever done it before, if you're a strength conditioning coach, if you're someone who has taken a team through the weight room, you understand what I mean, because you typically have young adolescent or young adult athletes, right? We're asking them to pick up very heavy weights, heavy objects, relative to what they're used to, most likely. Sometimes we're asking them to lift it over their head, or we're asking them to lay down and push it away from their face, or we're asking them to set it on top of themselves and then move up and down with it. And we're asking them to do all these awkward things because at the end of the day, most of the time, they're athletes. They're used to playing basketball, soccer, baseball, football. They might not be used to doing all these weird exercises with a bunch of weight on them. And we're asking them to do those things in a confined space, often under fatigued physiological states. And there's a lot of them relative to the number of coaches in the weight room. For me right now with my teams, usually the maximum is about 30-1. I might have an extra coach every once in a while to help out, but that's a big challenge to make sure they all stay safe and you get through everything you need to get through. So if you don't have a system in place that helps you do this effectively, if instead you are constantly putting out fires and having to correct those kids in the corner who are off tasks, and you're always having to look for pieces of equipment or remember what the plan was for that day, or tell every single athlete how much weight to use all the time, or demonstrate 5 times in a row like the same exercise for different groups of athletes, I mean, good luck to you, because that's going to be a very tough challenge and most likely is not going to scale very well and not going to be very repeatable. So having systems in place, modes of operating, getting athletes through training sessions safely and effectively is going to be what's best for them and best for you in the long run. So how do we set up these systems? What do we really mean here on setting up a system for organizing the chaos? We could talk about things like program design, the X's and the O's, the sets and reps and exercises. We're not going to really get into that today. We could talk about how we kind of set up the layout of our weight room for efficient workflows. We're actually not going to get into that today either. And instead, we're going to focus our attention on operationally, what are the steps we can put in place? What are the objectives we can put in place before workouts, during workouts, and after our workouts to give us the best chance of having safe training, number one, emphasizing safety. Number two, emphasizing efficiency, because we have limited time, limited space, and we got to get our work done. That's our job. Number three, maximizing coaching and teaching opportunities, as well as giving yourself on as many opportunities as possible to connect with your athletes. And then number four, how do we create a system that reinforces all three of these points I've made so far? That's our culture. Our culture is the way that we do things. So we can keep ourselves and our athletes accountable, but how do we also get our system to help us do that as well? One great way that we can set up and reinforce systems is through the use of checklists. And so whether you actually check this off on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on some sort of software that you use, doesn't really matter. We have checklists within the Volt app. We have checklists on the whiteboard for when we put stuff away. We have checklists printed on the doors and the windows, because it's just it's there. That it's the rules. It's the rules that you say you're going to follow, because you know that those rules, if followed, are going to make sure that your system is put in place and reinforced. So before your workout, a couple items to add to that checklist. Number one, just making sure that you have a good sense of the high-level plan for the day. What is the curriculum? Do you have one program going on? Do you have 3 programs going on? Okay, what are the different stations you need to leverage, pieces of equipment and areas of the room that you are going to be working within? as you're reviewing that plan, both for yourself and any other coaches that you're going to be working with. Number 2 is going to be understanding the exercises for that day and identifying, are there key exercises that are going to require more of the coach's attention? If we're doing Olympic movements like cleans or snatches, highly technical, right? So you're going to spend more time teaching there. Potentially having to tell kids less weight, right? You might have a group in the corner who's notorious for always trying to go way too heavy. Okay, pull that back a little bit. If you have an app like Volt can help kind of regulate those loads, but at the end of the day, they're all oftentimes young athletes and they kind of want to deviate from the plan a little bit. So just prepare for that. So understanding the high level plan, understanding the exercises, and then understanding the different athletes you're going to have as part of your training session. Do you have athletes who are dealing with injuries? How do you accommodate for that? Do you have athletes who are currently in season and they had a competition the night before, right? They're a basketball player and they played, they put in all 4 quarters they're on the court. They're your leading scorer or they're your point guard, right? And they carry the team. Just understanding what the circumstances are for the different athletes coming into train with you. Now it's time to actually get into the session, and we include the warm-up as part of the training session. So the warm-up is the best time for a coach to be able to get a sense of where are my athletes at. A lot of times you can just tell from how they walk into the room. Is the energy up? Is the energy down? Do I need to bring the energy up as the coach, or do I need to bring the energy down and bring the focus up? This is where you can set the tone and get your athletes to whatever level you need them to be at to have the most productive and safe training session. You can have a checklist for your warm-up as well. Number 1, energy, setting the tone. Number 2, reviewing the training session for that day so everybody has the right expectation of what's going to be asked of them. And number 3 is taking care of the actual physiological stuff. Getting their heart rate up, getting their body temp up, getting their breathing rate up, and getting them moving through full ranges of motion to prepare them for the actual training session. Now we're going to start our training session. What are we doing here as a coach? We're ensuring safety. We're making sure that athletes are moving properly and we are adjusting them or cueing them or teaching them as needed to get them on the right track. We are making sure that nobody's messing around and causing a threat to anybody else in the weight room. We are helping athletes move efficiently through the weight room, making sure they're following the right rest protocols, they're doing the right number of reps, the right number of sets, and that they're not wasting time doing anything like browsing social media or going to the locker room to check their phone or whatever it is. We need to be as efficient as possible. So that's also on you as the coach. And number 3 is just being present to adjust for the group if it needs adjusting. So when we are finding that maybe there is a traffic jam at the cable machine, or we are finding that the workout is taking longer than we had expected it to or intended it to, we can push that along a little bit. We find that, a piece of equipment broke. Okay, what do we do instead? We find that, I have 60 kids in here and I thought I was supposed to only have 40. How do we adjust for that? Those are the items on your checklist in your weight room during your training session. And as you wrap things up at the end of that workout, at the end of that training session, your items on your checklist are obviously putting the equipment back to where it needs to be so that the next time you get in the weight room, everything is set up the way it needs to, and you don't have to spend any time adjusting equipment. You have a clean slate every time you walk into the weight room. Putting equipment away. Number 2, sanitizing that equipment, wiping down the benches, wiping down any other piece of equipment that needs sanitizing. And then number 3, reviewing the session with the team, closing the loop. We set the expectations at the beginning of the session, then it was up to them to execute. And number 3, how do we actually debrief? Doesn't need to take very long, but make sure we close the loop and we reinforce that culture, reinforce those expectations, and give those athletes a chance to rate themselves on how well they did. If you can do those 3 things at the end of your training session, you're going to set yourself up for the next session, and you are going to reinforce the culture that you are trying to either establish or preserve within your athletic setting. I mentioned before, there's lots of tools that you can leverage here that are no cost, zero cost. You can create checklists, you can print them off, you can write them on a whiteboard. If you're interested in something like Volt Athletics, which provides the training plans and the interface within the application and tracking of all of your training data, as well as additional tools for helping with training efficiency, let us know. We're happy to help. I hope you put some of these into practice and look forward to hearing from you on how effective these tips might be.